now, as Yananda Maharaj pointed out, Krishna-ksetra Maharaj has joined the call. And just a little bit of an introduction. I can't remember when I first met Krishna-ksetra Maharaj. It was quite a long time ago, and he had asked me to become like a traveling secretary for the ministry. So I took on that service, and I was traveling to different parts of the world. This was just after I left the Polish tour, actually, traveling to different parts of the world on his behalf, and also getting trained by him. And then I think it was in 2005, Maharaj wanted to, move on to other pastures, and give up the service as the minister, and he wanted to get more involved in study, etc. And so he asked me to take on the service. And it was meant to be a 1 year trial, but the 1 year trial is still going on. I'm still here, and so Krishna Kshetra is my preceptor, and also a great inspiration for me personally. Spent a lot of time with him in Oxford also, and got to know him quite well during that period. And so, learned quite a lot from Maharaj at that time, especially about what it means to be in the mode of goodness. Maharaj, I don't think I've ever seen Maharaj get upset. So I'll hand it over to you, Maharaj. Thank you very much for everything. I do appreciate it.
Hare Krishna. First of all, thanks to you, Sangha Kavacha Prabhu, for carrying on with the ministry all these years and making so much of the ministry. I must say, I'm a little proud of myself that I found, I think, the right person to take up the banner, because you've been so dedicated and so consequential, I would say, in developing the ministry, and especially the education aspect of the ministry. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful to you for inviting me to this session with the Pujaris, the head Pujaris. And I hope I can say something that will be of interest for you. Specifically, I suggested to Sangha Kavacha Prabhu, and he agreed, that I introduce to you a small book which was recently published by the Australian BBT. I wrote this book on the request of His Holiness Devamrita Swami. The book is called Krishna's Wonderful Form, a Guide for the Perplexed. A title which might surprise you, but I'll explain, and I'll show you a copy of the book. It's a small paperback, which is quite inexpensive. And the concept of the book is to explain for a general audience, what is deity worship? What is this all about? What is going on in our temples? It's meant for, especially, I would say, people who visit our temples. As Devamrita Swami put it, it's for a congregation including so many people who, they come to the temple, they may have some appreciation of deity worship, but they recognize themselves that they don't really know much of anything, what it's about. They don't know, the wheres and why-fors of deity worship. So it's for a broad audience. And he asked me to write this book before the pandemic, and I was busy with assorted things, travel, of course, but so many tasks. But then came the pandemic. And at first I was locked down in North Maharashtra in India for 10 weeks. And I came to recognize, Krishna wants me to write this book because what else is there to do? I decided to make this as accessible as possible by writing it in the form of conversations. My inspiration was the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. I suspect most of you are familiar with that book. Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who at that time was Bob Cohen, was the person who was asking the perfect questions to Srila Prabhupada, who was giving the perfect answers. I was also inspired by Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma, which is a kind of novel in which he creates, we can say, various characters who are also asking questions and getting replies to those questions. And I thought, yes, this is the spirit of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in particular, to reach out to a wider audience and to bring the philosophy, the theology of Krishna consciousness to people in an interesting and accessible way. So with these in mind, I created 3 persons to make inquiries to the Swami, in this case, myself. We decided to just identify myself as the person answering the questions. And so my idea was to have three young people who are inquisitive and who ask the right questions for the Swami to respond to. And I also tried to bring it to create a mood of it being actually what has happened. At the same time, I explain in the introduction to the book that these are characters who are, however, asking questions which I have indeed experienced from people over the years. So with this basic structure, I started the work. And Devamrita Swami in particular, he said it would be good to address the question or the challenge of idolatry, that what you are doing, what are you doing in your temples? You have idols, you are doing idol worship. Idol worship, or idolatry, as it's called, is very much condemned in what are generally called the Abrahamic religious traditions, collectively, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So the first part, maybe what I can do is just go through the contents briefly of the book, so you know what it's about. And of course, my hope is that you will urge the persons who are responsible in your temples to order copies of the book, and I will give, I have 3 links, and I think there would be need eventually for more contacts of how to order the books. But I'm hoping that you'll be inspired, that you can get a few copies of the book for your temples, for your visitors. So the book is divided into three parts. After an introduction, part one is called "Do Devotees of Krishna Practice Idolatry?" ? The second part is called Krishna's Wonderful Forms, in plural. The title of the book is Krishna's Wonderful Form. And then here in part two, I'm addressing the question, who are all of these deities, these forms on the altar? And the particular case, the story I have is that a young student from the University of Florida has recently visited London, and a friend of his in London brings him to the temple at Soho Street, and there he sees Shri Radha Londonishvara, he sees Shri Jagannath Subhadra Baladeva, and Shri Gornitai. So his question, one of his questions when he gets back home is, who are all these deities? Who are all these forms? So this part two is explaining in simple ways, who is Jagannath, who is Lord Chaitanya, who is Nityananda. And then the third part is called Bhakti Yoga as Attending Krishna's Image. This phrase, attending Krishna's image, I've taken from the title of another book which I wrote several years ago, which was essentially the product of my doctoral research, in which I studied and compared the worship of Radharaman in Vrindavan. I compared then with the worship of Radha Gokulananda in London. That book I can say something about later if there's time. So these are the three sections, and then with each of them there are then chapters. Chapter one of this first part about idolatry is called Divine Cautions. Divine Cautions, seeing with understanding, avoiding spiritual detours. And this is leading into the main topic, which I begin really with chapter two, and this is titled Seeing Beyond Believing. And I should say that I sort of weave through the book a general introduction to what is Krishna consciousness, what is chanting Hare Krishna about, what is prasadam about, and so on. And again, I do this in a narrative way, inviting the guests to come for the Sunday feast, and then when they come for the Sunday feast, how they appreciate the prasadam, and so on. Chapter 3 is called Beyond the Idolatry of False Practice. Chapter 4, Beyond the Idolatry of Myth to the Realization of Divine Activity, and From Divine Will to Divine Preference, Defiant Sweet Krishna. So there's a lot of theology, we can say, in the first part, which is actually the longest part of the book. And I'm responding in particular to the challenge of idolatry that comes in Jewish tradition. One of the very early theologians of the Jewish tradition from I think it's the 12th century, His name was Moses Maimonides, and he wrote a book called A Guide for the Perplexed. And that phrase has actually become very famous. If you do a search on Amazon, you'll find over 500 titles that use that phrase. So I'm responding, I'm explicitly referring to him and his objections to having an image of God to worship. In part 2, the chapter titles, the subject is Krishna's wonderful form. So I have chapter 5, 2 masters of bhakti yoga, in which I, of course, speak about Gaur Nitai, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Then the Lord of the universe and his divine siblings. And then chapter 7, I focus specifically on Subhadra. I find we have very little in our literature explaining Subhadra Devi. So I thought, let's give her some special space. Subhadra, glorious, splendid, auspicious, is the title of this chapter. And there's a subheading within this called the original sustainable energy source. And then chapter 8, also dedicated to the feminine aspect of divinity, if we speak in abstract ways. It's called Radha, the embodiment of total love. And then in the third part, there are only 2 chapters. The third part, again, is Bhakti Yoga as attending Krishna's image. And chapter 9 within that third part is called Celebrating with Krishna, in which I make the point that what is going on in the daily worship, not just in festivals, but the daily worship is celebration. This is, we can say, the essential principle of what is happening in the temple. Chapter 10, the final chapter, is called A Day in Krishna's Eternal Life. Eternal is in parentheses, so I'm playing with a day in the life of Krishna, but his life is eternal, as is our life. And then subheadings there are Krishna's wardrobe, honoring Krishna in style, and only one qualification needed to serve Krishna. This is the final section of the book. So, as I said, the idea of the book is to make what we are about accessible. And I think we could safely say that one motivation for encouraging people to read this book is, yes, become a devotee, and then, yes, become a pujari. We need some motivation, I think, for inspiring devotees to do the unsung, glorious service of serving their lordships. And I see Mother Chandrakanti agrees with me about that. So, yes, I think without further ado, I should now put into the chat the links which I have for ordering the book. This will take me, let's see, a couple of seconds. And meanwhile, perhaps if anyone has a question about any of this, I can respond. Let's see, Europe, okay. at okay, there is a link for anyone in Europe. This is Bhaktivedanta Library Services at Radhadesh. In the UK, this is at Bhaktivedanta Manor, their temple shop. And strangely, for the US, the only contact I have is with the BBT warehouse. One would have expected that krishna.com would be offering the book, but I don't know, maybe it's too early, maybe they don't know about it, I have no idea. And so what one needs to do for the US is to simply write to Jagadish Ananda Prabhu, and this is his email address. That's all that I could find. Yes, good question. For South Africa, I'm sorry to say, I do not know. I also do not know for Australia. It was published by Australian BBT, so it shouldn't be difficult to get. It was printed in India. However, there were no orders for the book by the Indian Yatra, to my knowledge, which is another interesting curiosity.
All right. In yes. Australia, I contacted a devotee called Dandakaranya.
What about him?
Well, he's the person to contact to get the book.
And do you have a contact information for him?
Yeah, I can probably put his email address in the chat.
Okay. Yes. Okay. On the subject of books, if there are no questions about this particular book, I'd like to call your attention. Some of you may already know that the first volume of first-class translation of the Haribhaktivilāsa is now available, and it's available open access. It can be downloaded free of charge in digital format, in PDF format. First volume means that there will eventually be, I believe, 4, if not 5 volumes. The translator is Brigupada Prabhu in Finland, who is a professor of religion at Obo Academy. He is an excellent scholar, and he has been working on translation of the Haribhaktivilāsa since many years. And a special feature of this translation is, number one, he's translating directly from the Sanskrit, unlike most editions you probably have seen, which tend to be translations from translations. That is to say, translations from Bengali into English or translations from Hindi into English, carrying over mistakes in translation that have been made. A second feature is that he has translated the commentary, which is attributed usually to Sanātana Gosvāmin. So it's possibly an auto commentary or from one of his followers, disciples. And again, it is directly from the Sanskrit. And a third feature for anyone who is particularly interested in such details, this is a translation which is a critical edition. What is a critical edition? Brigupada Prabhu has done his homework very thoroughly. He has gone to several libraries in India, as well as in Oxford and London, I think also Paris, where he has found manuscripts, not printed volumes, manuscripts of the Haribhaktivilāsa. And he has collected over 100 manuscripts. And aside from indicating that the Haribhaktivilāsa was very much valued, and therefore so many manuscripts were written, copied, there are differences in the manuscripts. These are generally very minor differences, but there are differences. And what he does, he records all of the differences, selecting out of the 100 manuscripts, 11 most important ones, so that one can see every single sort of variation on single words or phrases, or sometimes verses, or exclusions or inclusions of verses. So that's called a critical edition. It's something that a certain species of human beings are able to do, scholarly persons. So that book is available. Where it's available, if you search Google and go to the publisher Brill, B-R-I-L-L, publishers, and then you search simply for the title of the book. And I think the title is listed in one word. So Haribhaktivilāsa. Or you could also search his the author's, the translator's name, Mons Bru, M-A-N-S, and B-R-O-O. I think I'm at the end of my time. I've been advised that I should stop after 28 minutes.
If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask you, Maharaj, there's time for that.
Okay. Otherwise, perhaps I should mention also the book that I mentioned previously, which I wrote. Ramananda Gopal has. So I'll just mention again the Attending Krishna's Image, which is available at Bhaktivedanta Library Services.
I've also just put the link for that Haribhaktivilāsa publication in the chat.
Oh, good.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Okay, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to you, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Since you're speaking about Haribhaktivilāsa, what do you think, what significance has this book for us in nowadays Vaishnava tradition or ISKCON, especially deity worship?
Yes, I think that's a topic for a whole nother session. Briefly, I would just say, excuse me, it's a kind of compendium. It's a kind of encyclopedic work, so to say. And it's not expected that one perform all of the rituals that are described there. As Brigupada explained in one seminar just a few days ago, if you would do all of the rituals, the daily rituals that are described, it would take you from early morning until 2 p.m, nonstop. And it's indicating that the householder who would possibly be practicing this would be allowed 2 hours for doing whatever he, and it's mainly the male person, needs to do to maintain his family. So to earn a living, you have 2 hours a day. Right. So it's a kind of compendium or encyclopedic work, but it is specifically intended for pujaris. The introduction to the book you may find interesting because, as I remember, it's over 100 pages, the introduction, and it goes into extensive detail about just how the book needs to be contextualized, how, why it was written and so on. One interesting detail, I think, is that Righupada was able to determine very definitely that Sanātana Gosvāmi was the author of the book. This is something that has been argued against. There are those who argue that it was Gopal Bhatta Goswami who wrote the book, but he has shown that there is clear evidence that it was written by Sanātana Gosvāmi, which is what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also said. So he's confirming that. But yeah, your question is a good one, but it's a bigger topic. You can read it just because it's amazing and it's interesting, and it can be, I think, an inspiration to see that ritual detail is very exacting and facilitates understanding how one can relate with the Lord as a ritualized person, so to say. To unpack what I just said would take longer.
Okay. Again, Maharaj, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Sangha Kavacha Prabhu, and all the best to you and all the best to all of you who are taking part in this Sangha.
Yes, and hopefully you'll join us again next year for our Sangha.
Krishna willing.
Always a pleasure to have you. Okay. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.